Hey guys, welcome back to my corner of the universe. Let me know what's going on in your neck of the woods because I'm dealing with the end of a Pluto transit and I'm trying to suck all of the juice that Pluto has to offer me because why not? That's the whole point, right? Let me know what transits you're going through and how you're dealing with them because in today's video, we're going to be talking about the things that I've been doing to deal with my Pluto transit. Namely, we're going to be talking about the shadow. If you want to skip around, make sure you look at the timestamps that are going to be listed down below because maybe you already know what shadow work is and you just want to skip to the astrology part of this video. I'm going to be linking that in the little timestamps. But if you're a beginner like I was, I'm going to let you know what the shadow is, why you might want to look into shadow work. And lastly, what most people I would think would come to me for is the astrological components of the shadow. So how can you find your shadow in your natal chart? I had heard everybody that talks about spirituality on the internet talked about the shadow and shadow work. And they either kind of glossed it over, like it should be like abundantly apparent what shadow work was and I should have just been doing it, or they made it seem like it was something that was so mystical and to me unattainable. They were like, you have to go to a mountain in Peru and there's going to be a guide and you're going to take ayahuasca or you're going to smoke peyote, or there are these things that are mystical that you can do in order to meet your shadow. And so I just never learned how to do shadow work. So if you have heard about shadow work and you've never received it in a way that made sense to you and made it practical, let me know in the comments that I wasn't the only one who was just kind of like, yeah, shadow work, like I've heard of it, but I don't know how to do it. Let me know if it wasn't just me. But for those of you who have a very short attention span, I get it. I sort of have a short attention span and I need visuals. So this is the visual that pretty much sold me on doing shadow work. And even though the word ego kind of gets on my nerves because it's like one of those like fancy words, and I like to be a man of the people, I like to use common words. You can replace ego with like your conscious self. The self that you know yourself to be, how you present yourself out in the world, your idea of who you are. That is your ego. That is the part that is above the surface of your consciousness, right? But the deeper you go under this, the water basically, which is your consciousness, your subconscious mind is below the surface. All of that part of this iceberg is still a part of who you are. And essentially what happens when you do shadow work is that you bring out parts of yourself that are hidden beneath the surface so that you can be a more whole individual, a cooler, just like more dynamic person. And you're going to feel way more integrated, way more complete. Like that feeling that we all have that like makes us feel like, no, there's something outside of me that like I need to go out into the world and find it through a relationship, a career, there's so many things that we feel are outside of ourselves that are calling to us. And actually, like there are things calling to us, but they're calling from the inside, my friend. If you don't do the shadow work, you're just settling for the top. If there's still like a gnawing feeling inside of you that you're still not happy, you might want to do some shadow work. So what is the shadow? Let's briefly define it. I'm going to be looking at my notes because I don't want to forget anything. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. So the shadow essentially is the part of your psyche that holds either behaviors, beliefs, or ideas that you feel were not helpful for your survival in the world. Notice the word survival is very important when we're talking about the shadow and the ego. The ego, your conscious self, is who you believed, who you got the idea that you had to become in order to not only just survive in the world, but to succeed, so to speak. In order to make it, you had to choose a conscious self. And in choosing that conscious self that you became, you had to basically unchoose anything that was not that conscious self. Okay, so everything that didn't help that ego, that self, like propel forward, got put in your shadow. Everything that you felt was either unhelpful or bad or wrong or damaging to who you were trying to become in life got relegated into your subconscious mind. It got like thrown in the depths of that water. Through all of this shadow work exploration that I've been doing, I came across the work of Robert A. Johnson, who I absolutely love. And he wrote this book called I already forgot the name of the book. Owning your own shadow. It's a really it's a quick read. It's really, really good. And he talks about the shadow as being your civilizing process. So to be civilized is to be, like an upstanding member of society. You have to do things in a certain way because of the way that your society has expectations for you. And the civilizing process happens not just through society as a whole, but also through your family, through your parents, your country, wherever it is that you live, your community, your street, even. All of these things influence the person that you become. That's just basic sociology, right? Even genealogy. So this is all external. These are all messages that you're receiving from the outside from the moment you were born, and you're absorbing it whether you realize it or not. So this is conscious. So your parents literally tell you, hey, you have to make your bed because good little girls make their bed in the morning. Good little girls are neat and organized. Or it's subconscious, right? So you look around you and you see that nobody's talking about their feelings. Your parents are just kind of very tight-lipped when it comes to emotional situations. So you're like, oh, okay, we don't talk about feelings. That would be bad and weird. And I don't want to be bad and weird. I'm trying to survive. Or you look around you and you look for successful people, people that are happy, people that are making money. Maybe in your society, making money is seen as something very important, right? We live in a capitalistic society. So that's one of the messages that gets very blasted into our ego and our conscious self. So anything that goes against that, anything that you do, for example, in a capitalistic society, if you do something for free, oh man, you're not respecting your time. I'm a rising Capricorn, this is something that I had to learn and unlearn. So in astrology, this is where Saturn and the cross of matter come in. So Saturn is very much attached to the civilizing process, and so is the cross of matter altogether. The cross of matter is just the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the IC. All of that talks about your incarnation. And another way that we discuss Saturn in astrology is that Saturn is the pain of incarnation. So the idea is that we come from spirit. We are spiritual beings. We come from spirit, but then we're born and we become incarnate, we become a physical body. And being a physical body means that we will suffer. And what is it that we suffer? One huge thing that we suffer is the process of choosing a conscious ego and therefore creating a shadow. Okay, but why does this all matter? Why would you even care? If the iceberg didn't convince you, let me give you 4 very clear reasons why you might want to go about integrating your shadow. And without integrating your shadow, you're always going to feel incomplete. And essentially, you kind of roam the world looking for things that are going to fill a part of yourself because you feel kind of empty. You feel like I'm missing something. And people have different ways of filling this void. Some people think, I'm going to find the perfect truck to park in my driveway, and that's really going to fulfill me. Other people are like, you know what? I'm going to have a child, and that's going to fulfill me. I'm going to meet the perfect partner, and that's going to fulfill me. There are different things that our ego just naturally is drawn to that make us feel like we will be complete once we have those things. But what ends up happening is that once we attain those things, we very frequently find that we are actually not happy because the void that we're trying to fill is really the meeting of the other part of who we are. If I didn't make it abundantly clear with the freaking iceberg, let me bust out this tree. So I really love this quote. It says, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. There, as it is with literature, with quotes, there are many ways of interpreting this. But the way that I see it is that you are meant to be this very large tree. And large trees have very deep roots. When you are a tiny little sapling, or when you're a little weed that doesn't have very deep roots, you can just get blown away very quickly. And that is when you are not a very integrated person. People can come and wreck you and destroy you very easily. Life can wreck you and destroy you very easily. But when you go about the process of unearthing your shadow, you become more yourself. And as this quote says, you grow deep ass roots, and a tree that is deeply rooted will not be destroyed. It will not be swayed no matter the weather outside, because the weather is going to keep changing, right? Things that are outside of yourself, they're going to change. There's going to be sunny days. There's going to be great periods of your life. There's going to be some difficult ass periods of your life. And if you do not have deep roots, you're going to fall flat. You're just going to You're going to be knocked over and you're going to be destroyed. And I'm going to keep using pictures to try to convince you. Okay, so number 2, without integrating your shadow, you'll continue to attract people into your life, people or situations that will trigger your shadow. People who get under your skin, situations that get under your skin that just make you feel upset. If you're upset in your situation, in your life, those feelings of being upset, they're meant to wake you up to what's going on inside, like what's going on beneath the surface. We're not on this path of doing inner work. Oh man, I hate words like that, but it's just the truth. It's the inner work. If you're not on this process of doing the inner work, then you're just kind of swayed around through life, going through difficulty after difficulty. And all of those difficulties, they're really just trying to guide you towards you doing the inner work, basically. Do you have a nosy neighbor? Do you have a mother-in-law that talks bad about you? Do you have a father-in-law that is really judgy? Are you attracted to people who take advantage of you? All of these things, I know they all sound like really bad and like, how could they possibly be coming from inside of me, Denise? But the thing is that like they're coming from inside of you because they are opportunities for you to meet your shadow. Even if, let's just say you're just like, Denise, I don't have time to do shadow work, because if you've been led to believe that you have to go to the mountain and do plant medicine, that is one way. It's absolutely a way of doing it. But if you don't have time to do that in your life, if you don't have the money, you have a lot of responsibilities. Doing inner work is the most important work that you're going to do in your life. If you just do that and you die, you've lived a happy and a good life. But people do not have the resources often to go do that. They don't have the time to take off of work to go do plant medicine in the forests. And my whole thing is that like if salvation isn't for everybody, that like I don't want to be a part of it. That's just how my personality works. And so that's why I want to simplify things. So please, if anything is confusing, let me know in the comments, because like it really matters to me. And people who want to do this can do it. Even if you choose not to do the shadow work, if you choose to keep this hidden, the thing about the shadow is that it never goes away. It never goes away. It cannot be destroyed because it is a part of who you are. All that happens when you keep it repressed, you are fermenting something in a bottle. Have you ever fermented anything? Have you ever made like tepache or kombucha or anything, kimchi, anything like that? Have you ever seen how it like bubbles? If you put the lid on and you don't let it breathe, it will pop one day. And that is essentially what happens when people let their shadow get so strong. It built so much like momentum inside of them that it just explodes out like a freaking volcano. The shadow can really ruin what you built in your life. You tried to control yourself for so long. You have no control left. Everything that you had and that you loved like gets toppled over. So a perfect example of this that I think a lot of people will be familiar with is like, you know, like preachers or televangelists, people that are famous for like their spiritual ego or for being very upright members of society, for being very lawful, very good. You put themselves on such a pedestal that when they fall from it, they're falling so freaking high. Like they're really going to hurt themselves on the way down. So these are the people that are super famous for like, for example, telling people not to consume alcohol, and then they get caught like being addicted to gambling, or they get caught like with sex workers. Or when you have super conservative politicians who get caught doing all of these unlawful things when they were presenting this entirely different persona to the world. Another example of this is like when somebody says like, oh, she was acting totally different from herself. Oh, I don't know what came over me. When you act totally out of character, it's just an example of your shadow coming out from the darkness because you've repressed it for so long, and then something happens that triggers it. The people who run off with the secretary or run off with the pool boy, usually this happens because they're like, oh, like I'm such a long-suffering person, I'm just doing the right thing, and they don't allow any joy or fun into their lives. They feel like I have to be perfect, I have to just go to work, my life is just difficult, and there's like the tiniest temptation comes into their life and they just run off. A year later, 6 months later, they realize they ruined their life, they ruined the life of their children, their family. Like, how can they go back? They already did what they did, right? Alas, you cannot run away from your shadow forever. It will catch up to you, and if it's been running for a long time because you're running away from it, that shadow is going to be strong. It has endurance. Okay, so now the part that is super in my wheelhouse, the astrological component. How do we find it in the chart? First, let me say that absolutely every symbol, every planet, every house, everything has a shadow. Everything has a conscious side and an unconscious side. But the things that carry the strongest shadow are where we tend to hide, repress, or project things. So as astrologers, we tend to look at the 12th, the 8th, the 7th houses, and Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto for places where we repress, we hide, we project things. That's where we go as astrologers. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this introductory video to get you started with shadow work, to get you thinking about where your shadow, your strongest shadow, might be hiding. So the 12th house that I'm very familiar with, this is the things that we exile, suppress, or even spiritually bypass. Planets in here hold qualities that we want to hide because we feel that exhibiting the qualities of those planets would be hurtful to the world, basically. We want to do good for the people around us and we want to help people, so we hide certain parts of ourselves in here in the 12th house. So planets in here tend to be self-denying, wishing to act out of love for others, but because we are, in fact, like, we're people, we're not Jesus Christ, we are people and we have needs. So what we do when we have planets in the 12th house, we put somebody else's needs ahead of our own. And it's this self-denying behavior that results in bitterness and resentment. And it often eventually erupts into anger when we feel like, oh my God, I've been bending over backwards for this person. And then one day you just can't take it anymore. And the person's like, they didn't even realize that you were bending over backwards. They were just like, oh, I just thought you just didn't have any needs. I thought that like you were just a nice person. It's hard to blame the other person too, because you're doing this out of your own volition. You're doing it to yourself, but you're doing it to sacrifice yourself for somebody else. People that you were actually trying to help, you're trying to bend over backwards for that one person, you can end up doing or saying things that are actually very hurtful to that person. So anytime you want to do something that is for somebody else and that you don't actually want to do, I'm going to tell you right now as a professional, don't do it. Don't do it. Do things that you want to do. If you can't find a reason why you actually want to do the things that you're doing, don't do them. Just trust me. Because it's going to build up over time and then you're going to explode. So people with planets here tend to be so kind to others and bend over backwards until they reach a breaking point and they go in the opposite direction. And then they're just done with the person. Or sometimes if they've been like this to the entire world, like to everyone they encounter, what could happen is that then they're just done with the person and they're done with the world. They don't want to deal with anybody because they're just like, I'm done bending over backwards. Like the path of people with a lot of planets in the 12th house or Neptune interactions is that they need to learn to have boundaries and they need to learn to be people, to be incarnate, and that it's okay to take care of yourself, right? You're a person too. This is what I love to say. So the 7th house, this is where we project qualities onto other people. These are qualities that we often cannot see in ourselves. And this is in the case of the sign of the descendant, so whatever sign is on the cusp of your 7th house, but also planets in the 7th house. So energies here cannot be accepted as one's own, but actually like they are our own, because the 7th house is, it's kind of like a mirror. It's showing us who we are through another person. So we therefore attract people into our lives that bring this energy into our life, right? In order to force us to integrate the energy. So for example, you have Mars in the 7th house, you're going to attract quarrelsome people. Why? Because you're supposed to learn how to be assertive, how to stand up for yourself. You attract these like quarrels, basically. If your sun is here, you attract maybe self-centered people, creative people, people with big personalities, because you need to learn to appreciate yourself, right? All of these sun, solar qualities, you need to see somebody like displaying them like in full display so that you could learn that like, oh, like I have that inside of myself. It's okay to care about myself too, right? It's all very ironic. I know. I realize how ironic it is. So Pluto is where we feel the pull of obsession, fear, power struggles, and eventually, ultimately, the positive side of this is transformation. But planets connected to Pluto repress vulnerability. So you're repressing something. You're repressing vulnerability and softness. So you bring situations into your life that are going to put you in a very vulnerable position. Usually you get intimately attracted and attached to somebody who makes you very vulnerable because of how much you feel you need them. That tends to happen with Pluto situations. For example, if you in your natal chart are a Sun Pluto person, you're going to attract power struggles that dare you to declare like who you are. Or if you're a Venus Pluto person, you can attract relationships that are going to make you feel super obsessed. You're going to experience some very painful losses that ultimately you're supposed to teach you how to have self-love rather than love for somebody else. Saturn is where we carry shame, self-doubt, and fear of not being enough, of not measuring up to the standard of society, to our family, to our parents, whatever. So Saturn represses anything that is childlike, innocent, and trusting. So everything that is like kind of like wholesome and like pure. So when we have really strong Saturn in our chart, this represses our inner child and often our joy, because, you know, it's our childlike self that experiences joy. And when we're a very Saturnian person, we don't get to experience that. So it often creates bitterness towards people that we see out in the world who are experiencing this like childlike joy, or people that we see as being like irresponsible, or people that are just like doing whatever they want. They're just, you know, following their heart. We become bitter towards people like that because it almost feels like the burden of our responsibility is heavier because that person, even if it's like totally unrelated to you, it could be a random person in the street. If you see them being irresponsible, you're just like, it's because of people like that, you know, because that's how it feels when you have this very strong Saturn burden on your back, basically. Lastly, Neptune, this is where we disown anything that is unspiritual, impure, or not loving. And the shadow here can be massive, like truly super big, and it has a huge potential for lashing out in the opposite direction. So in the opposite direction of everything you want it to be, you can end up going if you don't deal with the shadow. So when we have very strong Neptune in our charts, we don't often allow ourselves anything that is selfish or mean. So we'll build up these qualities in ourselves because we're like repressing anything remotely selfish, even remotely assertive. We're repressing it. And when we do that, every time we do that, we're actually strengthening that quality inside of ourselves. And then eventually what happens is we do end up doing something that is supremely selfish and supremely mean because of how much we didn't want to be selfish or mean. So a balance must always be created because we live in a universe of balance. When you choose one quality and negate another, essentially you're strengthening both sides inadvertently. So this video is only the beginning of my shadow work series. So please let me know in the comments what planet, house, or anything that you're interested in me talking about in terms of the astrology of shadow work. Like, for example, like if you're like, Denise, what is the shadow of Venus? What is the shadow of Uranus? I'm very interested in the shadow of Uranus. Let me know in the comments if you are too, or anywhere within your chart that you're wondering about your shadow. Let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, or as I said, if anything was unclear, please let me know to clarify in the comments, because I just want this to be useful, because this has been very useful for me. And I just want to share it with you guys because, like, why not? Sharing is caring. I will see you in the next video. Bye.